First Minister of Scotland. I have had 2 conversations with him. He's on our board here, and he's a great storyteller. So after his little speech here, if you can buttonhole him, get him to tell you all his stories in government and out. He was the First Minister of Scotland for 6 years, and he's been a Labour MP for a longer time. And currently, he is associated with several humanitarian projects, mostly in Africa. And I hope someday soon we see him back here as a minister of some sort in a new government in 2015. So please give a hand.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and a pleasure to meet the ambassadors. It's great to see so many ambassadors taking part in the conference this week, and particularly from Africa. I chair the parliamentary group on the Great Lakes of Africa in London, and visit that region regularly. I met your colleague, the ambassador in London, recently. In fact, he's coming to speak to us next Wednesday. So from the DRC. So it's good to see you both here today. I want to talk this morning about rebranding Scotland, but more actually to talk about what can be achieved by rebranding a nation, both internally and externally. I am very aware that this is an international audience with people from around the world, and that my accent is very strong. So if there's anything I say that's not clear, or if I don't answer questions clearly enough, please let me know in the course of the weekend. I think it's even if you can understand my accent, it's also easy to misunderstand politicians when they are saying things, or for them to misunderstand what you're saying. So I'm always very conscious of that. A story I've told here before in this context, the last school that I visited when I was First Minister of Scotland back in 2007, it was a brand new school that had just been built, and I was formally opening it as First Minister. And we had this fantastic day with a glorious ceremony. Everybody dressed up for the occasion, and some great speeches, some music. The school was shiny new, looking terrific. Everything seemed to be absolutely perfect. And at the end of the ceremony, I was taken to the headmaster's room to do a radio interview. And outside the headmaster's room was one little boy sitting on a seat, as there is in every school in the world probably. One little boy sitting outside the headmaster's study. And he had his head down, and I used to be a school teacher before I was a politician, and I could never resist the temptation to intervene in these situations. So I stopped and spoke to the boy, and first of all I asked him what he was doing there when everybody else was in the main hall for the ceremony, and he kept his head down and muttered something to himself. So I thought I would persevere. So I said, "Have you been in trouble this morning? Is that why you're here?" And he looked up at me and he nodded his head. And I thought, right, what can I do? I'm not a teacher. I can't discipline him. But maybe I can say something that would make him maybe a little bit scared and think about the future. So I said, "Do you realise that I am in charge of all the prisons in Scotland?" And he looked up at me and his worried face changed to a huge smile. And he said, "Well, you will have met my big brother then." He was obviously in one of the prisons. So suddenly we had a connection. It wasn't quite the connection that I had planned to make with him, but it made me realise that you can misunderstand easily what someone says. So if my accent is unclear, please let me know. This is 1990. This is actually 1997, and it commemorates the fact that in 1999, a new parliament was created for Scotland inside the United Kingdom, but with our own lawmaking powers. If you look carefully there, you can see me before I had grey hair, just at the back, behind the Prime Minister, and we had just had a successful campaign where about 75% of the population had voted in favour of this new parliament. And the parliament gave us huge powers over education and health, over the criminal and civil law, but also over enterprise initiatives, economic development, and over the promotion of Scotland at home and abroad. We had power over a number of important Scottish bodies. Sorry, can you just go back a little bit? For example, Scottish Enterprise, which was our national enterprise development agency. Scottish Development International, which was outside Scotland, in North America and Asia and elsewhere, attracting investment into Scotland. Visit Scotland, which was our tourism promotion agency, similar to the one that was described about Sri Lanka last night in the presentation here. But also over education and industrial policy. So a very comprehensive range of new powers that gave us an opportunity to do something about the branding and the image and the economic success of Scotland. When I took over as First Minister in 2001, we looked at the major challenges that the country was facing. And amongst those challenges were, first of all, what was described in Scotland as sluggish growth, but basically was no economic growth. We had suffered badly by the movement of jobs in electronics from Western Europe to Eastern Europe and to Asia in the late 1990s. Scotland had a large electronics manufacturing sector, and our economic growth had reduced quite dramatically as a result, and had been at almost zero for about 2 years. We'd had a problem for decades of population decline, where there was a feeling in Scotland that if you wanted to get on in life, you had to move out, and that had resulted in a population decline that saw predictions that we would drop below 5 million in population by 2009. We had a problem with our tourism industry, partly because of the attacks in New York in September 2001, because a lot of our tourism came from North America. And we had a challenge in our tourism industry that we had to try and recover from. And obviously, in the early part of the new century, there were massive changes in global competition, with new emerging economies competing for jobs and investment in every continent of the world, and countries, particularly small countries in Western Europe, having to match up to that challenge. So our objective was to first of all, and this is a key primary objective, was to reverse population decline. Secondly, to improve growth in the economy, but also inside Scotland, and I suppose maybe even outside Scotland as well, to raise confidence in ourselves. Fourthly, to celebrate diversity, which I believed was absolutely linked to reversing population decline. And to do all that, we wanted to find a new way of promoting Scotland. Reversing population decline, for me, was an absolutely central political objective for two reasons. One was because, obviously, a declining population and an ageing population seriously threatens the economic base and, to some extent, the social structure as well of the country. But also, I believe that an increasing population, particularly one that was more multicultural and more diverse, would be more likely to be dynamic and enterprising and successful for Scotland in the future. So what we wanted to do was to celebrate diversity in order to attract more diversity, in order to have more young people coming from different parts of the world to Scotland. And that was a central part of our strategy to promote Scotland in the years that followed. Always gets a little laugh. We conducted some market research, perhaps unusually for a government. We decided we would go and find out what people thought about Scotland in different parts of the world. So we conducted some market research in Asia and in Eastern Europe and in North America and elsewhere. And what we heard, I suppose, looking back on it, was predictable, but it did kind of surprise us at the time. Most of the images of Scotland in the year 2003, as it was then, were based on the film Braveheart. People thought that we were this country that was living about 700 years before. There was lots of mist around, lots of mountains, plenty of castles for people to be living in, or at least for the rich people to be living in. We were generally pretty friendly, although we were a bit ferocious maybe too. And I think some people even thought that we looked a bit like Mel Gibson in the film. But that's only the football supporters. So, what people didn't know, and we tested this, and people were absolutely stunned, But what people didn't know was that we had, for example, we produced more scientific research papers in Scottish universities and institutes per head of population than any other country in the world. That we had an education system, a comprehensive school education system that was the oldest in the world. That we had a financial services industry that was among the top 5 in Europe, that based in Edinburgh, and 2 major international banks, and that we had 5 international airports. And the little silly comment at the end about Anne Rhodes was one person in a market research group, I think in the Czech Republic, who was surprised to hear that we had roads. I think she really had taken the Braveheart film to heart. So this was a surprise to people. So surprises are opportunities in marketing terms. Surprises are opportunities. So we had to use these surprises to get our message across. So the brand that we were trying to sell, this is the brand that we were trying to sell, that we were one of the best small countries in the world, that we had the people, the authentic culture, the education and the enterprise to compete with the best. So that was as a marketing summary, as a brand that we wanted to get a message across around the world. That was at the core of our message. And our slogan was, which we launched in the middle of 2004, "Now is the time and Scotland is the place." So we wanted to bring this right up to date, not 700 years ago, but today in the first part of the new 21st century. That now was the time to come to Scotland, and Scotland was a place to be. We wanted as our objectives to retain homegrown talent, to have more young Scots in particular stay in Scotland to work and to set up businesses, to be educated, to have their families. But we also wanted to attract new people to study and to visit, to work, but also to stay and to make their homes there. We started with a concentration of facts. We wanted to get facts out about Scotland that did surprise people, but that got that message across. So we talked about the concentration of universities, more universities per head of population than any country in Europe. We talked about medical research and those research papers that I mentioned a second ago. We talked about Dolly the sheep, the world's first cloned animal, which was, of course, created in Scotland and just outside Edinburgh. We talked about financial services and the scale of the industry in Edinburgh and also in Glasgow. The 5 financial airports. The fact that Scots in the earlier centuries had invented television, penicillin, antiseptic, some of the basics of surgery, and of course the telephone. And we also talked culturally about the fact that we had the largest arts festival in the world in August in Edinburgh every year. So we were trying to paint a picture of a country that achieved things, that was interesting, that people might want to come to. And how do we do that? Well, we basically used as our core, as well as these words and these facts, a series of images, which I think are still entertaining even now, 9 years on, and some of them are still being used. What we called them was the classic icons with a modern twist. So this was building on Scotland's heritage, that history of scientific invention and the fact that people around the world knew something about Scotland, a little bit about Scotland, but with a modern twist to show that the country was changing or it had changed. We had pictures of places, but always with people in them too. We had a bit of humour and also a little bit of diversity to emphasise the fact that we weren't just a bundle of people who all looked the same and all spoke the same. So pictures like this with a modern Scottish kilt, this guy on his mobile phone, not looking very Scottish at all, but actually a very Scottish modern image. Pictures with a bit of humour. Prince Charles at a Highland Games in the Highlands of Scotland, but not a formal photograph of royalty, but someone of him laughing and enjoying the occasion. This is a fashion show that we run in New York every year, still running actually. It happens on the 8th of April next month, where modern Scottish textiles, the modern Scottish industry, is highlighted by celebrities on the catwalk in New York on a charity evening. So modern tartan images like this, but also with a little bit of a twist that people didn't expect. These two guys turned round on the catwalk and it said "just married," although that was, of course, before anybody was thinking about legalising gay marriage. These are whiskey barrels. So instead of just having whiskey, here we have an interesting modern photograph of a guy who's working on the whiskey industry. And the whiskey industry was a big part of this push to promote Scotland internationally. And as part of the follow-on from 2004, one of the things that we achieved was we made whiskey the number one imported drink in China, which economically was very, very important for Scotland. But it wasn't just about adverts. These adverts were important, the facts and the messages were important, but we wanted a bit of content as well to all of this. So in addition to, and I think this is very important for rebranding or branding a nation, as well as having the imagery right, as well as having the message right, you need some content, some substance that can draw people in or that can influence people. So, for example, we invested a lot in events, attracting events from around the world, everything from conferences to festivals, music festivals and so on, award ceremonies. We spent a lot of time trying to influence the editors of magazines and newspapers so that they would understand more about modern Scotland and the things that would be written, produced about Scotland would be more relevant and attractive. We did a lot of networking. We worked with a huge Scottish diaspora all over the world, set up a network called Global Scots, of business people who advised young Scottish business people how to expand their businesses globally. And we also used the UK. So although we had a strong new Scottish Parliament, we were still part of the UK. So we had the advantage of using UK embassies around the world, and we used them for promotional events. I remember one in particular in Paris where the ambassador, the UK ambassador in Paris, was just about to retire. He was a Scottish diplomat who'd worked for the Foreign Service of the UK all his life. And he had never been able to fly the Scottish flag outside the embassy because he'd always been flying the Union Jack. So in the last month before he retired, we held a big Scottish reception in the embassy, and he flew the Scottish flag over the embassy for the first time in his career, and he almost wept with joy that night with the celebration that we had. But it was fun occasions trying to promote the modern Scotland with dance and music, but also with this strong message about our industry and our science and our education. And the other thing that we did was we tried to ensure, because of this drive to increase the Scottish population, that we started to make Scotland a more interesting place to come to, but also a welcoming place when you arrived. So we worked very hard at the entry to Scotland. Whether people were coming for music festivals, coming to study, coming to work, or coming as tourists, then their experience as they arrived in the country had to be better. So we set up this website, which is called scotlandistheplace.com. We used this branding Scotland with the saltire, a new logo on everything. We did it consistently across all the different organisations that were promoting Scotland. And that way people got a clearer message, but a welcoming message when they arrived in the country. We set up an initiative called Fresh Talent that allowed people coming to study in Scotland a longer period to stay in the country than they could elsewhere in the UK before they had to leave again, giving people a chance to set up home and have a job after they graduated. We set up a thing called the Relocation Advisory Service, which was something we'd learned from a couple of countries elsewhere in the world, where people could go to if they were coming to study or to work. They could go to find out about housing, their legal rights, how to set up a bank account, all these kind of things. We ensured that at airports and at the shipping ports, there were more welcoming reception areas that people could go to for information. We built the universities and the colleges into the system so that every university and college spent more time working with new students, particularly those from international locations, to make them feel more welcome and actually want to stay. And we linked the opportunities for inward investment in Scotland for companies more to those universities and colleges too. So if a company was coming, for example, we attracted the European headquarters of Dell Computers. And one of the things that made them decide to come to Scotland rather than go to France or Belgium or Wales or anywhere else was that we promised that we would attach them to the local university so that all the training that they wanted for their own staff, but also training for future staff and access to graduates would be a direct link. And that was very attractive to them. And we invested very heavily, obviously, in the quality of the tourism experience. Although I have to say, all these new people we were attracting from Eastern Europe, from Asia and elsewhere to come and live in Scotland were improving our tourism experience because of their work ethic and the quality that they brought to the tourism environment. And as a result, we saw our economic growth, which had been far behind the rest of the United Kingdom and had, as I said, been round about zero when I took over as First Minister. By 2007, we had equalled the rest of the UK, and we were starting to edge ahead of the rest of the UK. Since 2005, Scotland's population has grown every year. There is now no danger whatsoever that we're going to drop below 5 million, and in fact, we're moving towards 5.25 million in population. We saw for the first time really in living memory more people come to Scotland from the rest of the UK than leave Scotland to go and work in the rest of the UK. For my generation, talented people going to work in London and the southeast of England was a huge problem for Scotland, but we were starting to attract people back to come and work in some of these new industries and in education and so on. We saw tourism numbers increase, obviously, but also, and this was crucial, we saw a rise in national confidence as well. Indigenous Scots feeling more proud about their country and more confident about the future. And today, although I'm not in office anymore, and much of the theory of this has been continued by my successors. So this is a fairly recent, this is just 2 years ago, it's a fairly recent advertising campaign for businesses to come to Scotland. And you can see that they are still using this idea of slightly different kinds of images. So here you have the bagpipes, the traditional Scottish image, but with medical instruments in the bagpipe to emphasise the fact that we have this medical research taking place in Scotland. And here you have a whiskey glass, but it also looks like maybe a renewable energy, a wave power machine or something like that. So it makes the point that we've got the traditional whiskey, but we have new industries as well, like renewable energy. So what I wanted to say here this morning, I know that you've been talking about nation branding here this week in Berlin, is that I think nation branding serves two purposes. First of all, it can change the image of a country externally throughout the world. It can only do that if it is based on facts and reality. I don't think you can make it up. I think you have to play to your own strengths, historically and current day strengths. But I think it is possible with strong modern marketing to make an impact about how your country is perceived in different places. But you have to be comprehensive about it, you have to be honest about it, and you have to be ambitious in your approach. But I also think that it can encourage change at home. And there's no doubt for me that the effort that we put into a campaign that was called One Scotland, Many Cultures, which was about celebrating diversity. For me, too many politicians, particularly in Western Europe at that time, too many government leaders, particularly at that time, but they're still doing it today, were either sending out extremely hostile messages about immigration and about cultural diversity and multiculturalism, or they were talking about tolerating differences. And I wanted us in Scotland to celebrate differences. I thought Scotland would be a stronger, a healthier, more successful, more dynamic place if we were more like California or somewhere that celebrated difference, that used diversity for its energy and attracted hard-working people from different cultures to come and to mix and to contribute. And then, of course, perhaps to move on, because that's not necessarily a bad thing. The world, the world is stronger for the amount of moving between countries that goes on today. So we didn't just want to demonstrate that we had changed as a country. We wanted to encourage that change internally as well and make it real. And make the people of Scotland part of the solution to this population decline, because they themselves would become more welcoming. And probably one of my proudest days in all of this is many of you will be aware of the Sun newspaper in the UK, which is known for its very right-wing perspective over the years and quite a hostile populist approach to issues such as immigration and so on. And they still have that approach to this day. But the day that we launched this initiative in Scotland, the Sun in the UK had yet another hostile story about an immigrant who had been, doing something wrong down in England somewhere. The Scottish Sun, its sister paper, the Scottish Sun, ran a front page story with a picture of me surrounded by people of different cultures. And the message on the front page was, "Our country needs you." And they backed the campaign. So I think it is possible to shift public opinion. I think it's possible to shift media opinion. But I think it sometimes takes leadership and ambition to do that. And I think, for all that it's now a few years ago, this is a good example from Scotland in nation branding that others could learn something from. Thank you very much.